And now, America's greatest living blonde person and someone who has given more heart attacks to liberals than their habit of eating too much caviar and pate. And Coulter, welcome to you, my darling.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, the book, you're being as conciliatory as ever, Demonic, How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. Is the liberal mob endangering America?
Well, right now it's endangering the entire globe. You know, I spent 2 years writing this book about mob uprisings, mob movements, how mobs work, how they affect a man in a crowd. And within 2 months of the book coming out, we have mob uprisings all over the globe, including in Vancouver, down here in Wisconsin. We have flash mobs running wild throughout this country, in Britain, in Greece, in Paris. I knew the mobs would come back. I didn't think it would be this soon. I must have a fantastic publicist.
Now, let's talk about Vancouver, because obviously we're a Canadian show. This was a bunch of drunken louts who had nothing better to do. They had money, they weren't poor, they weren't struggling. That's really the problem of liberalism, or just self-indulgence?
That is not exactly the sort of mob I talk about, similar to the flash mobs. That's more of criminal behavior, as you indicate. The mobs I write about, starting with the French Revolution, are political mobs. And by the way, an apolitical mob and a criminal mob are not always all that easily distinguishable. I mean, after the LA riots, the Democrats used that, which was also basically just a criminal mob, to push through all sorts of, idiotic social welfare programs and, this office and that office. They did manage to expand government massively in the wake of that. More what I am talking about is from the French Revolution to the Weathermen and the SDS in the 60s, to the Wisconsin public sector unions, the government workers, rioting, breaking windows at the Wisconsin State Capitol, going to legislators' homes, surrounding them, trampling on their flower beds. I mean, that is a form of domestic terrorism. It's not like 9/11, but it is intended to shock and frighten people. And all mobs, they always have the same characteristics. You can really never tell, what is your point? What is this about? Why are you doing this? Why, when bankers came to town in Seattle, about a decade ago, did a bunch of filthy animals run out on the street and start smashing Starbucks windows? And this is a form of behavior, and these are literal mobs we're talking about. I also cover more the sort of psychological mobs, which liberals are also susceptible to. But this using street protests that can get out of hand and can often end up in property destruction and physical violence. This is what liberals use and have since the French Revolution to grab more power for themselves, which is why they encourage things like class warfare and physical attacks on their political opponents. They encouraged massive redistribution of wealth, so that you end up, as Britain is a little more advanced than we are in America in the welfare system, but you end up with all of these potential rioters who are just sitting home living off a federal dime for their entire lives.
Let me ask you something. This is a Canadian story. I don't expect you to know too much about it, because we are only Canada, of course, but the leader of the opposition in this country, Jack Layton, he was a social democrat, a new Democrat. He was a decent guy, and I knew him quite well. He passed away from cancer, very sad. Now, all of us said it's a loss. He was a good Canadian, he wasn't a fanatic, and we regret his passing. But it's become a neurotic obsession now. You have to almost pray to Jack. We've removed God from society, and in its place we've put someone like Jack Layton. We had a columnist in this country who wrote a very moderate article saying, I think we're going a bit over the top. She's been threatened with death, the most foul and abusive language. If you don't buy into the mob adoration of Jack Layton, I'm not blaming him, by the way, then somehow you're a bad guy. So this is what you meant by psychological mob mentality.
Yes, I have a whole chapter on the mob's tendency to create messiahs. Even an intelligent man in the presence of a crowd will lose some of his intelligence and engage in similar and striking behaviors, and one of them is, mobs are obviously very susceptible to slogans, and they don't need to make any sense, like, you can't hug a child with nuclear arms. What does that mean? To a crowd, it seems to make perfect sense. These glib, superficially appealing remarks. They go from wild passions from one to the next. Rumors are extremely likely to take hold in a crowd, and I think it's the chapter 2 of my book. Mobs tend to turn their leaders into messiahs. They turn political figures into messiahs. We certainly see it in this country with going back to Andrew Jackson, the father of the Democratic Party. I have quotes from his biographer about how crowds would surround him as if he were their father and they his children. And most recently with Clinton and Obama. Both cases we have liberal female journalists writing about the phenomenon of women having sex dreams about the president. You know, as much as Republicans liked Reagan, and they didn't like him that much when he was president, I mean, they were constantly criticizing him. He was certainly not he was our president, but it was more like Bush. He wasn't revered. He was being attacked all the time by conservatives. We've never had sex dreams about any of them. I promise you that. And, you know, your story on this Leighton fellow reminds me, I have noticed the converse when prominent conservatives die. Even conservatives will leap out and make a point of saying, well, I didn't agree with everything Jerry Falwell said. Well, of course, Reagan had his problems. There was Iran-Contra. You almost have conservatives doing exactly the opposite. Can you, just on the day of his death, can you just talk about the things you liked about the conservative?
Look, I accept your point. As you were speaking, I was trying to think back of historical examples where I could contradict you. There aren't that many. But perhaps the Tea Party movement? I mean, Sarah Palin does not always speak as though she was Kierkegaard, yet people do adore her, don't they?
They do, but you notice she is not running for president yet. I mean, according to the polls I've seen, a majority of Tea Partiers do not support Sarah Palin for president. The passion for Sarah Palin is a little bit like the passion for Ron Paul. I mean, I loved Sarah Palin when she ran as vice president. I don't think she should run for president now. But it's a small group of very passionate supporters, and that, you know, that can be anything. That can be a rock band or a sports group. You do not see that taking hold in any large numbers for Sarah Palin or Ron Paul, I might add. On the conservative side, we tend to attack our candidates more than idolize them.
The book is Demonic: How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. And Coulter, you're an absolute legend. And you told me to say that. It's been a real joy. You take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.